you feel like you've been knocked to your knees and dreams are shattered and your heart is broken, how do you muster the maturity to trust God even in an unimaginably painful deep valley?
Well, I can tell you two, both fairly brief, but they were two lessons I learned. My wife was dying upstairs in the bedroom from stomach cancer. Her sisters came down from Detroit to be with us. One was a nurse, so she would hook her up to the the sugar water to be fed intravenously. And I was downstairs alone while they were tending to her, and I'd go up and sit with her. But I was alone a lot. And as I said later in a book about her, I said that Job and I became really good friends. Now, I don't mean that I suffered anything like Job did, but I realized that Job and I became buddies because I had lectured on Job for a few years before Deb died. And I used to say this in a sentence: the theme of the book of Job is this, in my opinion. He never found out why he suffered, but he also realized that nothing would have changed if he had found out, because the same things would have happened. So here's the theme: Job realized that he knew enough about God to trust him in those things he didn't know. Let me say it again. Job realized that he knew enough about God. It's the conclusion of the book. He knew enough about God to trust him in those things he didn't know. I knew this was a world at that time. I knew this was a world that Jesus was raised from the dead, but I didn't know why this stuff happened to me. And I thought, if God raised Jesus, duh, I can trust him to know the reason. I don't know the reason. He does. I'm going to leave it there. The other one is I was studying the book of Hebrews, and in Hebrews 5, it's a stunning comment we read right past, and I didn't. I read it many times, didn't catch it. The Son suffered, right? He suffered seriously,
Right.
but he suffered for the sake of obedience. He grew from his suffering. I thought, oh no, not the Son of God. He was strengthened by his suffering. He grew from his suffering. And my second conclusion then was, when you think you're suffering, here's a question for you. Jesus suffered maybe as seriously as anybody ever lived by crucifixion,
Oh,
not
sure.
to mention theological aspects. But here's the question: in your suffering, in my suffering, do we think we should suffer any less than Jesus did? Are we better? Do we learn faster? If I don't think I have a right to suffer any less than he does, then why am I blaming God for what's going on when Scripture says I learn and grow from my suffering too? So those two things: Job became a buddy, and Jesus became a buddy during my suffering.
Is that what Philippians 3:10 is alluding to? That we love the first half, that I may know him in the power of his resurrection, yea, and the fellowship of his
And
suffering.
the fellowship of his suffering. Many times Paul says over and over again, he doesn't say it the way I'm going to say it, but what he's saying is, every time I take a blow for the Lord in my preaching and being in the wrong place at the wrong time and being with people who can't stand what I believe, he says every time, he tells the Philippians, he tells the Thessalonians, he says it over and over again. He says, all my suffering is for your benefit, and it'll come down to your glory, and it'll be to my glory too. So he internalized his suffering as a great victory. He said, I'm willing to take it because it means freedom for others, salvation for others. And frankly, I think he would say it earns him rewards, although he didn't talk a lot about that. He does say it a few times.
So, A week ago Thursday, I was wrapping up a radio show, exploring the Word that we've done on the American Family Radio Network now for 15 years. And you've been on that program before with me. But I finished the show, and a few minutes later, my phone rang, and it was a man that had been in church his whole life, and he's a computer programmer. I've known this guy several years, a little bit, but anyway, he's having a faith crisis. So he calls me up, and the number one, person in his life was his grandfather, and his dad had left when he was young, and so this is a very key relationship. Well, the grandfather died, and he said he was in halfway through his grandfather's funeral, and he had this, overwhelming shock that he didn't know if he believed in God or Christianity. So I'm listening, and he said, you can't really prove it. And he said, I just don't know that I can have faith in things I can't see. So we talked for 2 hours. And I mean, I was, praying and doing my best to kind of talk him off a ledge, as it were. But I've got two things. One, at least in our ministry, it seems like emotional pain is often the precursor to intellectual
Yes.
skepticism.
Yes.
The other thing, how do you, if somebody suddenly is saying, I can't do this faith thing, I need proof. I want something tangible and objective and provable. How do you approach someone who's in that kind of a faith crisis?
I have several answers depending on where they are personally and where it would seem. I'll ask some questions, and I'll try to move to the direction that they seem to indicate would give them the most victory. But one thing I want to say right off the bat, and I usually go to this one first, whether they like it or not. What you said about uh, um, factual pain, philosophical pain, often leads to emotional doubts.
Mhm.
Many of the worst things, maybe the worst things in our life, the loss of a husband or wife or child. I mean, what's worse than the loss of a child or a husband or wife? And and according to the statistics, psychological tests have been done. One's being done right now. A survey's being done, and as high as 70% or more of doubters doubt because of emotional reasons. And they say they want proof, but very few are healed by getting something that we could call proof. So I've talked to, I'm connected with 3 people who do ministry with doubters full time. And one's talked to thousands of people, and so have I, cases. And you can give them, the most of them, you can give them evidences till they're blue in the face, quote unquote, literally.
Mhm.
And if they're having emotional doubts, they know how to ignore. They'll come right back and they'll go, but how do I know? Well, here's your evidence. But how do I know? As long as they're hurting, you have to give them balm for their pain, not facts for their doubts. I think they
Wow.
need I think they need balm of some kind. And today the most powerful, I'm no counselor, but I think the most powerful balm today is what you can learn from a secular or Christian counselor about, well, C.S. Lewis said it, learn to tell your emotions where to get off. Lewis says, unless you can tell your emotions where to get off, you can't be a good Christian. You can't even be a good atheist. He says you'll be a creature dithering to and fro, dependent on the latest state of your digestion. And he said, if you can't master your emotions, don't look for an answer. I think I would tell them that right off the bat because I think they have to do something with their emotions if it involves counseling, if it involves just working through them. And then I personally would go to those other 2 answers. Job, And do we deserve to suffer less than Jesus did?
You know, we're living in a generation where many, not all, but many think emotions, feelings are the litmus test for truth. And
Right.
really, reality is not that way. Emotions are not a reliable litmus test for truth, are they?
No, they're not. In fact, how that is, if you get something for your emotions tonight, whether it's a pill, whether it's your favorite night out, whether it's being with your favorite person, if if you get that high to overcome this emotional upheaval, where are you the next morning? Where are you the next week? Where are you when the same question comes back? And you think, I'll tell you, I've been there, done that. You think the question is, give me the evidence. And then someone shows you the evidence, and I'll say, not enough. What else you got for me?
Hey, you know
Pills,
what?
pills don't do it forever. You know,
Hey, I came across something in
you got it.
Augustine.
Go ahead.
Listen,
Oh, yeah.
1600 years ago, Augustine, he lived 354 to 430. He said, and I just came across this nugget talking about the perennial doubter. He said, what then can I adduce to convince those who refuse to believe? They refuse to believe these facts, in other words, the gospel, unless we can show them or prove by ocular demonstration or adequate testimony. Okay, ocular demonstration. Show me something I can see. Give me adequate testimony. But when we do, they say, not that, not that. And I was reading this in I don't know if it was Confessions or City of God, but okay, even 1600 years ago, people were saying, give me some ocular testimony. And then when we try to do that, says Augustine, they say, no, not that, not that. I mean, human nature hasn't changed a whole lot, has it?
It has not. It has not. Alex, I don't mean to change the subject, but a third thing I go to, I go through emotional doubt. Well, that's actually a fourth. Then to Job, then to Jesus. Do we deserve to suffer less than him? The fourth thing I talk about is some of the incredibly strong data for near-death experiences. If there's an
Amen.
afterlife, if there's an afterlife, to me, that's the closest we can come in our lives. I can't see Jesus today, but I can read testimonies of people who had ocular experiences when their brain, there are dozens of cases now of, as far as we know, no brain, no heart working, no neurology. And the person has experiences that can be verified from 2 blocks, 5 blocks, 10 miles, 100 miles away. And the experience can be verified. To me, that's ocular. So if you're one of those rare people, really rare, who can be solved by ocular experiences and you lost somebody close to you, tell that person you could be with them someday.
Hang
And
tight. We've got to take a break. More on the American Family Radio Network with our very special guest, Dr. Gary Habermas. Stay tuned.
AFA Action takes attacks on the family seriously. The enemies of the family constantly employ new tactics to try to sneak past our radar. They know if we stand together, their evil plans will fail. Your gift to AFA Action allows us to stay vigilant against their onslaught. And if you give this month, you'll receive access to the Cultural Institute video When Your Faith is Illegal by Frank Harbor on AFA Stream as our thanks. You can make your gift today at afaaction.net.
All right, Sandy Rios with you. One more drama playing out. Is the sky falling? Are we going into recession? Are you going to lose all of your 401k? Are you going to lose your job? Are you going to be able to afford groceries?
People better be training their kids, getting back into church, Sunday school, reading the Bible. That revolution will save this country.
We've had a political revolution. Now we need a spiritual revolution.
Sandy Rios on Sandy Rios 24/7. Listen on the podcast page at afr.net.
Godly Mothers. This is David Wheaton, host of The Christian Worldview. The great preacher Charles Spurgeon said, Never could it be possible for any man to estimate what he owes to a godly mother. Proverbs 31 describes the character of an excellent wife and mother. Strength and dignity are her clothing. She opens her mouth in wisdom. She looks well to the ways of her household. Her children rise up and bless her. Her husband also, and he praises her, saying, "Many daughters have done nobly, but you excel them all." Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Hear our most recent program with my 91-year-old mother at thechristianworldview.org, and then tune in this weekend as Mike Gendron, a former Roman Catholic, joins us to discuss the new Pope.
Listen to The Christian Worldview with David Wheaton, Saturday mornings at 8 Central on American Family Radio.
You could be a part of our first ever Weekend with AFA, Thursday, October 2nd through Saturday, October 4th in Tupelo, Mississippi.
Our Weekend with AFA event in October is going to be a chance to meet AFA supporters in person.
We'll have tours, fellowship, special speakers, and more.
I'll do some stand-up comedy, Abe will do some preaching, and I'm really excited about it.
It's a Weekend with AFA, Thursday, October 2nd through Saturday, October 4th in Tupelo, Mississippi. Speakers will include Abraham Hamilton III, Jenna Ellis, Tim Barton, Tim Wildman, and more.
I am thoroughly looking forward to our Weekend with AFA coming up in October, where we're going to be able to meet our supporters like yourself, to fellowship, to visit our facilities here in Tupelo, and to have everyone come together for a wonderful weekend.
That's October 2nd through 4th. It's a Weekend with AFA, and we hope you can join us. Register at afa.net/weekend. That's afa.net/weekend.
Hello, my name is Andy Miller, and I'm the president of Wesley Biblical Seminary based in Ridgeland, Mississippi. We are developing trusted leaders for faithful churches, and we do that based in the authority of Scripture and in the reality that Christians can be transformed. We do that also through bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees. We'd love for you to learn more about Wesley Biblical Seminary at wbs.edu, where we're developing trusted leaders for faithful churches.
The Hamilton Quarter podcast and one-minute commentaries are available at afr.net. Back to the Hamilton Quarter on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to the program. What a blessing to be conversing with Dr. Gary Habermas, prolific author, apologetics leader. And Google his name. His website is his name. Is it ghabermas.com? Gary?
Yes.
Is your
www. I'm sorry. No. It's GaryHabermas.com.
GaryHabermas.com.
GaryHabermas.com. You're right, Alex.
One time I had a group of students at our house, and we had Dr. Norm Geisler, and this, we had 20 college students, and this one student said, "This is so great. This is like the apologetics jukebox, and we can ask ask Norm Geisler anything." And I kind of feel that way tonight. It's like the apologetics jukebox. We can ask anything, and we do have some calls. I want to get to in just a moment the number. If you have a question, it's 888-589-8840. Before the break, Dr. Habermas, you were talking about near-death experiences, and I would love for you to have been with me. I was in Austin, Texas a couple of years ago, and one of the people that was at this event was an administrator of several hospitals, and he asked me to come and speak to the staff at this palliative care hospital. So I was there, and I'm thinking, what do I say to these people? And suddenly I found myself in a room with about 150 people. And there were a lot of doctors, a lot of nurses, and I thought, what do I say? How do I, bond with this audience? And I got up and I said, thank you. It's really great to be here. And then here's how I opened it. I said, hey, you all make people comfortable in their final days and weeks. This is a great ministry, this hospital, end-of-life care. How many of you have seen things in the context of caring with dying people? How many of you have seen things that make you believe in an afterlife? You've seen things that make you believe the soul survives death. And it was quiet for a moment. Then little by little, hands begin to go up. And Dr. Habermas, there were a lot of doctors that were Indian. And they would say things like, well, I'm not religious, but I was at the bedside of a dying woman, and she said, I see Jesus. And for the next hour and a half, we heard story after story from nurses and doctors. One of the interesting things was all of the accounts of these people on their deathbed that said Jesus was in the room. And some of the stories are just almost hard to believe. I believe them, but they were talking about at the moment of death, the room got very bright. And I remarked to the group that all of the accounts really were overtly Christian in context. But if you would speak to it, isn't there more and more data that indicates from the medical world there are the soul surviving physical death? It's pretty compelling, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm looking over the section of my library that has those books, and these books are, the professionals that write them, they're rarely religious in nature. They don't talk about religions being true or whatever. They just give data. And one of the books by an MD, every article in the book was published in a medical journal, and the conclusion of the book is that in North America alone, as nearly as the medical community can estimate, at least 20 million people in the last few decades, 20 million have had near-death experiences. This is not like I'm not going to put my faith in something that happens 4 or 5 times or 100 or 200 times. How about 20 million? That's this book written by an MD, and everybody writing the book, the articles were published in medical journals. So, and I'll tell you one thing. There are now over 48 accounts of cases that are flat brain, flat heart, as far as we can tell. We don't have proof, but as far as we can tell, no heart, no brain, so no neurology. And in every one of those cases, things are reported from long distances, sometimes right in the room, but sometimes a long way, miles away. And you can go check from a police report, from all kinds of things. You can check. Now, what do you do when the brain's not operating and they're reporting things? That's to me, Alex, I like your word. That's the ocular word from Augustine.
Yes. Wow, powerful. Hey, we've got calls. Let's begin in Texas. Paul in Texas, thanks for holding. Welcome to our conversation with Gary Habermas.
Thank you for having me, gentlemen. I appreciate it. I really just had a comment. Many years ago, it was revealed to me that our emotions are actually, they follow our thoughts. And the example that was used that really spelled it out for me is that if we go to a scary movie, when this movie gets scary, not only do your emotions respond with fear, even your body will respond with an increased heart rate, and maybe the hair stands up on your arms or neck. But yet we're just sitting in a theater watching people play out parts, and we know that it's not real. But yet our body responds because we're thinking as though it is real. And so if your emotions, you cannot trust your emotions because they're purely following your thoughts. And if your thoughts are false, then your emotions will be false.
Well said. Any response in light of the gospel or our Christian walk, Dr. Habermas?
Well, just emotions. There's an example I use all the time because I hang around with a bunch of guys who are football nuts or hockey nuts. And they might go to work on a Monday and say, somebody messed my desk up. When I left here Friday, it was clean, but somebody must have come in. My desk is covered with work, and this just really ticks me off. And you get up to get a cup of coffee on some Monday, and you think to yourself, wait a minute, it's Monday night football. And you say to yourself, yes, okay, I've been watching Monday Night Football for decades. I know it was Monday Night Football, but when I remembered it was tonight, here's what my yes means. When I get home, the phone goes off, the lights go off. I'm in my man cave. I turn the game on and leave me alone. I'm where I want to be. And that's how I was okay with that work in my office, because if I finish it, fine. If I don't, great. Football's on tonight. And that's how strong the emotions are. And we can respond that way to things around us, so that we can control what's going on. That's what you learn in a lot of, again, I'm not a counselor, but that's what you learn how to do in a lot of counseling situations.
I'm going to come back to that. I want to get as many people in as we're able. Matthew in Arkansas. Matthew, welcome to our conversation with Gary Habermas.
Hello, thank you for having me. I just had a question about the famous passage in which Christ says, "God, why have you forsaken me?" And I've been just coming across some questions like, because we think of Christ and God as the same thing, even though that's kind of impossible for a human brain to really understand. But is it the case that in some way God knew that was going to happen, like in the case that it was sort of staged, or sort of like he knew what was going on? Or was it the case that there was for a moment like some doubt of God, like doubting about God? Like, I'm just a little confused thinking about that passage.
Matthew 27:46. Dr. Habermas, do you want to comment on that? When Jesus cried from the cross, he was actually quoting Psalm 22. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? What was happening there, Gary?
Well, first of all, personally, I don't believe Jesus sinned, but I don't think emotions have to be sinful. New Testament says, be angry and sin not. We can have strong emotions and not be sinning. But I think Jesus was having legitimate questions. We know from John the Baptist, he sends his disciples to Jesus. Are you the Messiah? And what's part 2? Or should we look for someone else? Whoa, John, you're thinking about looking for someone else? Well, John didn't say that. But he said, are you the guy? Or do we have to go elsewhere? And Jesus said, well, go tell them the miracles I'm doing, which is evidence. But John asked questions. Thomas asked questions. Paul had questions. Abraham had questions. David had questions. We're human beings. God knows who we are and our weaknesses. And I think we have to control them. I think we should do things about them. If you're in enough pain, you're going to do something about them. But I don't think having the emotions alone is like something that's horrible. I think God invites emotions the same way God invites everybody else. Come unto me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, I'll give you rest. There is rest for those who are having these struggles.
Dr. Habermas, those words from Psalm 22, Psalm 22 begins, my God, but it also contains, they pierced my hands and my feet. Psalm 22, which is a real messianic psalm, could it be in a way that, all of the pious Jews watching the Lord be crucified, they would have intimately understood the scriptures. Was it in a way almost saying, oh, you want to understand what you're seeing here? Psalm 22. Do you think any of the super religious Jews would have maybe connected the dots and said, oh, wow, he's quoting from Psalm 22, and they've pierced his hands and his feet. He's the Messiah. Would that realization perhaps come to any of them?
Alex, I picked up a book, a very learned book by a professor at a major university. And this fellow was Jewish, and he did not like Christianity. And he tells his story because he came to believe in the resurrection of Jesus, as C.S. Lewis says, he came into the kingdom kicking and screaming. And
right.
I haven't, just like you haven't followed a couple things here yourself. He tells the story that Isaiah chapter 53 is well known in Hebrew thought. And he wants to go back and dig some of this research out of the Jewish upbringing that he had, and he wants to find out what part Isaiah 53 played. That early creed in 1 Corinthians 15, Jesus died, was buried, rose, and appeared, twice it says, according to the Scriptures. That's the Old Testament. So here's this fellow saying, whatever happened to all these Jewish commentaries? And he probably gives 15 examples from the Jewish literature, not the Old Testament, commentary on the Old Testament and what they did with some of these passages.
And by the way, I want to go to Quinn in Mississippi. I'm sure you've heard of Rabbi Rashi, that is supposedly one of the greatest Jewish rabbis that ever lived. Rabbi Rashi, and I think he lived about 1,000 years ago. And we don't know how much he did or didn't believe, but Rabbi Rashi said whoever the Messiah was, if there was going to be a Messiah, he had to have come after the decree to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem and before the Roman besiegement in AD 70. So and this is a non-Christian Jewish rabbi, and I'm like, okay, sure, I'll take that window of time. I think there was someone in that window after the decree to rebuild the walls and before AD 70. There was someone born in Bethlehem. There was someone crucified at Passover. There was someone who met all the criteria for messiahship, and it was Jesus. Quinn in Mississippi, time fleets away. Do you have a question for Gary Habermas?
Yes, sir. Alex, I love listening to you, man. Thanks for what you do.
Bless you.
In 95, I got in a bad Jeep wreck. When they found me, I wasn't breathing. I was in a coma for 13 days. And I don't know if I had a experience or anything like that. But I was wondering, is it a sin or would it not be good for me to get hypnotized to see if anything comes up?
I would not recommend it. But Gary Habermas, what do you say?
I wouldn't recommend. Years ago, there was a real trend toward that being the answer to a lot of things, until in the literature. Again, this isn't my field. Counseling's not my field. But they found in the literature that a lot of people under hypnosis actually invented experiences that they thought they lived. I don't mean other lives.
We're almost out of time. Gary Habermas, forgive me, sir. We have to do this again. Folks, thanks for listening. I want to appreciate my guest, Dr. Gary Habermas. Check out his brand new book. It releases tomorrow. Stay tuned to AFR. May God bless you.